You know what I feel like? I feel all the time like a cat on a hot tin roof.
Hello and welcome back to the YouTube channel. I'm Maya and this is my YouTube channel. So recently I watched the film version of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. I've really been in kind of like I don't know, maybe it's classic, I guess like golden age of Hollywood movie kick. And then as I always do after I finish a film, I go to Letterboxd and I see what the people are saying and I give it my good rating. And one particular comment stood out to me, as usually it does, and it was discussing how the Hays Code really changed the meaning and the context of the film. So Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, the Tennessee Williams play, the play was adapted into a movie, and because of the Hays Code in the 1930s through early 1960s, some things were left out. So got me thinking.
I knew you'd come back. They always come back to me.
So first of all, what is the Hays Code? The Hays Code is a set of guidelines that kind of dictated how Hollywood was able to produce films. So if you didn't know, before we had the rating system in America, like PG, GR, PG-13, we just had the blanket Hays Code. And the reason why it exists, as we learned in film school, is because of the Catholic Church. Shout out them. Before the Hays Code, before the 30s, and like the early days of films used to be a little bit buck wild crazy. So films were allowed to show nudity. They were allowed to show like depictions of hell and adultery. Things were getting kind of crazy. If you've ever seen some Marlene Dietrich films, these are pretty good examples because a lot of them are pre-Hays Code. So one example is The Blue Angel with Marlene Dietrich. She is the star of the film. And the film is about this club called the Blue Angel, and this professor meets Marlene Dietrich, and she's like dancing and being provocative and flirting with guys, unmarried. And then she sleeps with the professor. They get married, and the most notable, I guess, thing about the film that really sets it apart, it's not a heroic portrayal. Nobody is really that good of a person. The ending is very sad and unfulfilling. The characters don't really develop as people, and they're kind of just sad, unresolved people. And that's kind of a hallmark of the Hays Code, is that problems are always resolved, people are always happy, things always work out in the end, and the hero always wins the day. So the Catholic Church was getting a little bit upset about these films because the parishioners were going to see these films and they were like, this is like, they're gonna end up being sinners. So the Catholic Church actually started to tell their parishioners not to go see movies anymore because they were like too worldly and too secular, and it's going to cause you to slip and leave your Christianly ways. So they worked together with Hollywood to create the Hays Code, which is a set of guidelines. And the guidelines, as you will see, have some very obvious ties to America's idea of Christian morality. So, for example, the Hays Code specifically states that no picture shall be produced which will lower the moral standards of those who see it. Hence, the sympathy of the audience shall never be thrown to the side of crime, wrongdoing, evil, or sin. And the Hays Code also had some really strange rules, which I honestly did not know about until doing some more research. If you're interested in learning more, I would recommend you go to precode.com and also the Britannica little like article thing about the Hays Code. So some things that the Hays Code kind of prohibited talking about are topics like white slavery. So no white slavery allowed. Black slavery, maybe. Relationships between black people and white people, so no interracial relationships. No showing of drugs, distributing of drugs, doing drugs, no gay stuff, no abortion. So I guess those last couple things are kind of obvious. Also, they stated that Jesus can never be talked about in vain. Jesus can only be praised. So you can never have a character being like, I worship the devil. That can never be a thing. Evil and good can never be confused. Evil is always recognized as evil and wrong. And criminals should not be made heroes, even if they are historical criminals. So this started to become the Hays Code's downfall. So in the 60s in Europe was having their new wave. Actually, like in the late 50s, early 60s, they were having their new wave of films. And a lot of the new wave films centered on this idea of more like realistic portrayals of life. So they didn't always have happy endings. Ambiguous endings became a hallmark of new age film. Characters were very flawed people. Heroes didn't always win. Nihilism was a common concept. I mean, I think a really good example of an American new wave film would be The Graduate, one of my favorite movies. So in The Graduate, our main protagonist, he sleeps around with a married woman, doesn't know what he's doing after college. He feels very lost. He feels like his parents and the people that he traditionally would be looking up to for guidance, he doesn't really trust what they have to say. He kind of finds them to be silly. And the end, although it's supposed to be a happy ending where he saves Elaine from getting married to this man that she didn't want to get married to, they run off together and they get on a bus. They just kind of sit on the bus and they realize they don't know what they're going to do going forward. There is no resolution to the story. We don't know what's going to happen to them, and they don't know what's going to happen to them, and they're not really that comfortable with that idea. So that's a perfect example of like a post-Hays Code movie. So anyways, going back, so Europe was making these kind of movies already, and Hollywood realized that they were losing out on their like market. So their market was being directed back to Europe because these films were more experimental, they were different, they were really dealing with more realistic concepts. And so finally they were like, we have to do something about that. And this is where we get the rating code. So Hays Code is now done away with. That's why it's not just a mass, it has to appeal to everybody kind of film. Now we have a rating system so people can kind of choose what they want to watch. And also a fun fact that I learned about in school is that before we had the R rating system, we like rated our films were actually called X-rated. So some older films are called like X-rated films, but they had to change this because of the porn industry, because porn had films that were labeled triple X, and so they didn't want to get confused with porn. So they had to change it to the R. Fun fact. Now a quick summary about Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. So it stars Elizabeth Taylor of White Diamonds perfume fame and Paul Newman of the salad dressing fame. How funny. So my grandma used to wear Elizabeth Taylor White Diamonds perfume, and I feel like I don't even see it in stores anymore, but I remember it was like one of the most highly sold perfumes ever, Elizabeth Taylor, and she got it for Christmas. I remember my dad got her like a gift set with the perfume and the lotion and the body wash or whatever for Christmas. So shout out to my grandma. Shout out to grandmas everywhere who wear White Diamonds by Elizabeth Taylor. Anyways, so Elizabeth Taylor plays Maggie and Paul Newman plays Brick. You're going to find out soon that every character's name in this play/movie is kind of stupid. So anyways, Paul Newman is walking around with crutches the whole film. And at the beginning of the film, he's trying to relive his high school football games. He's trying to like jump over these hurdles and he hurts himself, and then he has to wear crutches like a big goofy guy. So now all he does in like the first act of the film is sit on the couch and yell at his wife all day and be really annoying and a jerk. So Elizabeth Taylor and Paul Newman, Maggie and Brick, they're home at Brick's dad's house, Big Daddy's house, because it's Big Daddy's birthday. And Maggie is telling Brick as he's laying on the couch, she's like, I think it's kind of weird that everybody gathered here. I think Big Daddy is probably dying. And I know that your snot-nosed brother and his wife are going to try to get all of his money. So Big Daddy owns a plantation and he has this massive wealth. They live in a mansion. They have unbelievable wealth. And Maggie knows that Brick's brother, Gooper, his name is Gooper. Gooper is vying for this inheritance. So Gooper and his wife have all these kids. The kids are really annoying. They're running around being rude to everybody, bumping into people, causing a ruckus. Gooper's wife is trying to like organize the kids to like sing this song for Big Daddy when they pick him up from the airport. So she's like an annoying, try hard kind of person as well. They're constantly trying to impress Big Daddy. And Maggie's like, you know what though? I think he's probably going to give the money to us because you were always his favorite. And I actually think that he kind of likes me. And Brick is really annoyed by this because he's like, all you care about is money, blah, 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 blah. Also in this first scene, we see that Maggie is really trying to be affectionate with Brick, and Brick really is not having any of it at all. And this is where we get an introduction to another important character, though he doesn't appear in the film, Skipper. Maggie mentions to Brick, who's also an alcoholic, I should probably mention. So not only is he laying around all day, but he's also drinking all day throughout the whole film. He's an alcoholic. And Maggie says, you started drinking after Skipper died. Who is Skipper? He's mysterious for the first half of the film. So Brick is upset about this. He says, he blames Maggie for Brick's death. This is something that we find out in the opening kind of scene. And it's also stated at some point in between their argument that Maggie and Brick have some kind of agreement where Maggie can stay married to him, but she kind of has to leave Brick alone because Brick really doesn't want to show affection to her, won't kiss her, touch her, hug her, anything. He's really annoyed by her. And this is kind of where she says the famous line. She's like, it just makes me feel like a cat on a hot tin roof. And she just really feels neglected by her husband. Big Daddy comes home from the airport. Brick refuses to go downstairs and say hi to his dad, even though it's his dad's birthday party. And eventually this doctor comes up to talk to Brick and was like, Brick, gotta tell you something. Your dad is dying. We just haven't told him. We haven't told your dad, your mom, your brother. Nobody else knows except for you, but your dad is dying. And that's what Maggie thought was going to happen anyways. Brick is basically avoiding his dad the whole party. He won't talk to his dad, so his dad comes up to him and was like, you have to talk to me, because Brick is his favorite, even though Brick doesn't really like him. And so Brick and Big Daddy get into this big argument where his dad says, seems like you started drinking a lot after Skipper's death. And so then Skipper comes up again and Brick's like, you know what? Get Maggie in this room. We're going to talk about this. So this is where you have to keep the Hays Code in mind a little bit, okay? It's revealed in this big conversation, this big blowout argument between Maggie, Brick, and Big Daddy that Brick made a football team for his friend Skipper. He created a football team so that his friend Skipper, who's not very good at football and couldn't make it pro, could play football. And he was spending all of his time with Skipper. And Maggie admits that she was getting jealous because she's like, you spend an unnatural amount of time with Skipper. I'm your wife. We just got married. We're supposed to be doing things together. And all you care about is hanging out with Skipper all the time. Brick says that, I was spending all my time with Skipper until you ruined his friendship and you killed him. And so this all goes back to Maggie and Skipper. Brick accuses Maggie of sleeping with Skipper. And Maggie says, listen, I did try to seduce him because I thought I could break apart your friendship if I showed you that he didn't really care about you that much. He was going to sleep with me. And then you walked in and it looked like I was trying to sleep with him, but I wasn't going to do it. I couldn't go through with it. I was just trying to kind of prove a point, but you couldn't actually go through with sleeping with him. Then Skipper tries to call Brick and apologize. He keeps trying to talk to Brick about it, and Brick doesn't answer the phone, which causes Skipper to jump out of the window of a hotel and die. So Brick kind of insinuates that Maggie pushed him out the window, but he jumped out the window because he was upset that he was losing his best friend forever. Now, this all seems kind of dramatic and strange and odd, right? Because, like, what do you mean you got jealous of your husband's friend and he was so upset about the whole ordeal that he jumped out of a window and it looked like they were going to sleep together? What does this all mean? Well, now it's time to talk about the original meaning of the play. So in the play version of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, it is actually much more overt that Brick and Skipper had a gay relationship. So in the play, Big Daddy even says, like, it seems like your relationship is unnatural. Like you spent like a lot of time and you really like cared a lot about Skipper. And Brick tries to, insist that their relationship was normal. And then I will also say, watching the film, I think it's much more obvious watching the actors, explain everything their inflections and their delivery makes it pretty obvious that this relationship was kind of more than just a friendship. I don't make a football team for my friends because they're my friends. Like, that's like a crazy level of devotion to somebody to make a whole football team for them because they suck at playing football. And then throughout the film, Brick is like disgusted with Maggie's affection. He is so mean to her throughout the whole film, and everyone in the family can see it. And it's even Gooper and his wife even say something like, our room is right next to your guys. You guys are not having sex. Like, you guys fight all the time. You don't show any affection to each other. So that makes it a little bit more obvious that, why would Brick not want to have sex with somebody that he's married to? Perhaps he's homosexual. So big differences between the play and the movie that really kind of sparked the debate about the Hays Code and whether or not the Hays Code really changed the meaning of this movie is in the first scene of the play when Brick is arguing with Maggie. Maggie murmurs to herself. She says she shouldn't have confessed making love to Skipper. So in the play, they say, yeah, Maggie did do it. She went ahead and actually had sex with him. Maggie continues and says that Brick and Skipper's love was sad and awful because it could never be satisfied or talked about. That's something that is explicitly stated in the play. And she even says that when they went on double dates in college, it seemed like the boys were always out together. Skipper is the one who tried to like prove Maggie wrong, be like, I'm not gay, and tried to like make a move on her. And Maggie is trying to convince Brick to have a child with her. So she's like, we need to have sex because we need to have a kid. And Brick says, well, I don't know how you're gonna have a kid with somebody who hates you. Later, when Big Daddy confronts Brick about drinking, and he says, this all kind of started when Skipper died, he asked Brick if his relationship was, quote, abnormal. Brick denies that the relationship is abnormal, but then he also says that Skipper did call him. So in the movie, Skipper calls him and Brick doesn't answer. In the play, Brick answers the phone and Skipper admits to him that he's always been attracted to Brick. So it's pretty obvious in the play that Brick's homosexuality that he cannot express is the driving force behind his issues with Maggie, his issues with his family, and his alcoholism. Whereas in the movie, I would say that's kind of a small detail. It's definitely more subtextual, but I wouldn't say that's the driving force behind Brick and his bad attitude. It's more about this idea of mendacity, which is a really big point in the film.
Tell me, what are you disgusted with? Mendacity. You know what that is? It's lies and liars.
That Brick feels like his whole family is just fake. They're all money hungry, they're greedy, they're vain, they're selfish, and they're not a very unified family. And so they are like kind of just like all two-faced liars obsessed with money. And in the film, family dynamics and this like loss or lack of family values and dynamics in a strong family is what causes Brick's problems and what makes everybody else miserable. And don't get me wrong, Brick is right. His family they all suck. Maggie, to a degree, also kind of sucks because she does care about that money. Gooper and his wife are the worst of the lot. Big Daddy is terrible man to his wife and children. He says that like his wife annoys him and he shoves her off, and she was like, sometimes it feels like you don't love me, and he's like, yeah, wouldn't that be funny if it was true? Ha ha ha. And then he even tells Brick in the movie, he's like, feel great, my health is great, I'm gonna go meet a woman and have sex with random women now. So he really doesn't give a fuck about his wife. And then it's also very obvious he really doesn't care about Gooper, even though that's his firstborn son, and Gooper's really trying hard to impress his dad all the time and, you know, kind of prove his place. Money is his biggest source of pride. And so that's what the movie is about. And Brick, don't get me wrong, also sucks. He does this big thing about, oh, everybody here is a liar, everybody is so obsessed. And I'm like, yeah, dude, you're mean to your wife just like your dad. You don't care about anybody else in your family just like your dad. You sit around all day and yell at your wife, and you drink yourself to death because you're gay. Because you're gay.
I have an announcement to make.
What kind of an announcement?
An announcement of life beginning. A child is coming.
So now the Hays Code. So the Hays Code was undoubtedly a limiting set of guidelines, which is kind of why we got rid of it in the end, because it was halting creators from making real, authentic stories. Well, I am a strong believer that media really does change the world. It changes society, it changes public perception. So I do think, especially if your story as a creative doesn't align with these ideas, how are you ever going to get new ideas out there? And I think that's kind of what people were kind of getting sick of as the Hays Code was coming to an end and the new wave of cinema was coming into the US, that my idea in my life does not align with what I'm seeing in movies at all. And so I think the ability for creators to portray something a little bit more real made way for more change in the world and society. And so that's why I think Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is limiting, because yes, subtextually, I enjoy the subtextual nature of Brick probably is gay, and so that's the underlying reason behind all these things. But to himself and to the rest of the characters, it's this grand overarching idea about like family, but really we as the audience, those of us who are cued in, can see that it's probably something else too. And so while I enjoy the subtextual nature, I think having that be the forefront of Brick's issues kind of does create a whole different dynamic for the story. And that was the original intent of the Tennessee Williams play. Also, further, in the end of the film, he's just not gay also. So in the end of the Tennessee Williams play, it is very, one of those very unresolved endings where Brick and Maggie tells the family that she's pregnant and that she's going to have Brick's child, and that makes everybody happy. And then later, she and Brick go up to their room, and she's like, all right, time to make that come true. And Brick's like, whatever, I still don't like you. In the movie, Maggie tells everybody that she's pregnant and she's gonna have Brick's child, and then Brick is all of a sudden not gay anymore, and he's super excited, and he feels like this weight has been lifted off of him because he talked to his dad about family values, blah blah blah. Then he goes upstairs and was like, Maggie, get yourself up here, we're having sex, and I'm gonna make you pregnant.
Tell him, I'm not gay no more. I am delivered. I don't like men no more. I said I like women. Women. I said women. I'm not gay. I would not date a man.
So he's just not gay at the end of the film. And that's because of the Hays Code. And it did really change the most, I guess, impactful parts of the Tennessee Williams play. And so I also think it's interesting because Hays Code films, if you've ever watched any Hays Code films, really tend to reinforce the status quo. And so this is also kind of something that I learned about I took a romantic comedy class, that a lot of romantic comedies in this time period in pre-World War II, like post-Great Depression to pre-New Wave 1960s, really reinforce the ideas about this is what each person's role is, and they stick to that role. So Maggie, at the beginning of the film, really does not like children. She's a little bit more outspoken, maybe a little bit more bossy, and she is punished for that. And then constantly throughout the film, Maggie is defending Brick. She defends her husband. She sticks up for him. She tries to be affectionate with him, even though he rejects her and is mean to her. He's really, really not a nice person to Maggie. And in the end, she is rewarded because she chooses that she wants to stay with Brick even though he sucks ass, and that she wants to have his kid to make everybody else happy. By fulfilling her like womanly role, she gets to be happy and Brick is also happy. I mean, also something interesting I think is this film came out in the 50s, and Big Daddy owns a plantation, number one, and has a bunch of black servants. And an idea that is present in this film is like the rot of this family, that the wealth has rotted this family and they've never really been a cohesive, happy family unit. And I think the film almost gets it by showing us that the way that you accrue this wealth by having a plantation is an evil way to make money. And so, of course, the people who make money off of it are unhappy, rotten people. And they almost get it, except they don't. And so the servants are black servants. They're happy. Nobody mentions anything about, like, isn't it kind of fucked up that we have people working in the fields and that's how we made our money? And instead, a bigger emphasis is placed on, well, the money has corrupted us because we don't spend enough time with each other as a family, and not that the rot in their family is because of the evil business that they run and that they want to inherit so badly. And you know what I will say? I will kind of defend Hays Code films because I like to see directors and creators being a little bit sneaky in films and like putting these ideas and these messages in films that are not, obvious to maybe all who watch them, that are more subtextual, but those who kind of like, it kind of makes you feel like, oh, if you're in the know, then you're in the know. I kind of enjoy the Hays Code idea about like, despite logic, despite everything that has happened, despite, the reality of what would happen in every situation, somehow things always work out and heroes always, figure things out in the end. It's just kind of fun, and it's almost kind of like escapism for modern audiences to watch Hays Code films where above all odds things work out. And to play devil's advocate, did the Hays Code make movies a little bit more creative by putting all these ideas in the subtext, in that each person can kind of pull out their own meaning? So I think a big part of films is each person who watches a film has a different meaning to them. Maybe the creator's intent was this, but you really relate to this character and you really relate to something that this person did, and so you find meaning in them and you kind of create their own backstory for that person as well. It made actors more intentional about exploring a character's backstory maybe, and their true inner workings. I think it is an interesting idea, and I do kind of think sometimes that's lacking in modern films maybe. In short, I think the Hays Code made films what it is today. I really honestly think that media today would just not be the same if we never had the Hays Code. I think we needed to kind of see what we were missing to want it back and to force us to be more creative. Sometimes I think because everything is allowed to be so explicit in modern media, that kind of makes people, in some cases, less creative, because I think sometimes creators rely a lot on shock value and on doing something really unorthodox and out of the ordinary. And I feel like the really deeper meanings of the story and these really rich portrayals from the actors are sometimes missing. And the Hays Code is limiting. So honestly, some stories just could not have been told with the Hays Code era. But I do think that without that short time period in our history, media today, like, honestly, I could even relate it back to RuPaul's Drag Race, Game of Thrones, Modern Family. I don't know why I said that one. Could not exist today without the Hays Code first being a thing. So if you've never seen a Hays Code film, don't be scared. It's not... Older films kind of get better at for like being really unnatural. The acting style is sometimes a little bit different, but they really are such an interesting treat. And I feel like watching these films, it's really an interesting exercise to just be like, yeah, I can see elements of this here today. It's a fun way to really explore media and to think about what our media is telling us, and what media of the past was telling people of the past. And then after that, watch a new wave film and compare the differences. I'm not your teacher. I can't tell you what to do. But thank you for joining me today. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for joining me. Hope you have a wonderful day, and goodbye.